Ethan Harris knew fear. He tasted it every day. It clung to him like a shadow. School hallways were his battleground. Every corner held a potential threat. Whispers followed him. Laughter echoed in his ears. They called him names, shoved him in the halls, stuffed him in lockers. Ethan was an outcast, a target. He was different, smarter, quieter. He didn't fit in with the jocks or the popular kids. His intelligence made him a threat. His timid nature made him an easy mark.
Hey Harris, you think you're better than us with all those books?
Brad Matthews, the school's alpha male, led the torment. Brad was charismatic, athletic, and cruel. He saw Ethan's weakness. He exploited it ruthlessly. Ethan endured it all. He had no choice. Every day chipped away at his spirit. He retreated further into himself. Books became his refuge, knowledge, his shield. But even in the quiet corners of the library, he wasn't safe. The fear lingered, a constant companion. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale sweat and fear. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He approached his locker. Dread washed over him. The lock hung open, mangled. A foul odor wafted from within. Garbage. His locker overflowed with it. Rotten food, crumpled papers, and worse. Laughter echoed down the hall. Brad and his cronies. Ethan knew. He didn't need to see their faces. Their cruelty was a language he understood all too well.
Look at that, Harris. Guess you live in a dump now.
Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. This time was different. Something inside him snapped. The constant fear, the humiliation, it all became too much. He stumbled back from the locker, his breath catching in his throat. He needed to escape. He fled to the sanctuary of the bathroom. The laughter of his tormentors followed him. Ethan locked himself in a stall. His body shook with silent sobs. He was broken. He couldn't take it anymore. This was his breaking point. The bathroom stall was cold, sterile. It offered little comfort, but it was a barrier, a flimsy shield against the cruelty of the outside world. Ethan huddled in the corner, his back against the damp wall. Tears streamed down his face, hot and heavy. He tried to control his sobs, to muffle the sound of his despair. He heard the bathroom door creak open. The sound, usually inconsequential, sent a jolt of fear through him. He held his breath, hoping whoever it was would just leave. But fate, it seemed, had other plans.
Well, look who we have here.
Heavy footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. They stopped just outside his stall. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, his heart pounding against his ribs. The silence stretched, agonizing in its intensity. Then a voice, Brad's voice. The words dripped with mock sympathy. Ethan's blood ran cold. There was nowhere to hide, no escape. His sanctuary had been breached. The lock on the stall door rattled. A moment later, it flew open. Brad stood there, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. His cronies flanked him, their faces a mixture of amusement and disdain. Ethan cowered back, his arms instinctively raised to protect himself. It was a futile gesture.
What's wrong, Harris?
He shoved a phone in Ethan's face. The screen glowed, illuminating the scene. Ethan's stomach lurched. He recognized the video. It was him, crying, broken, humiliated.
Going viral, buddy. Everyone's gonna see the real you now, the weak, pathetic loser.
The phone shook as Brad's laughter intensified. He slung an arm around Ethan's shoulders, his grip bruising. Ethan wanted to scream, to lash out, to disappear, but he was frozen. Trapped in the glare of the phone's light, his shame broadcast for the world to see. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was public execution, and he was the unwilling star. Brad and his gang finally tired of their sport. They left Ethan huddled in the stall, his body trembling, his spirit crushed. The bathroom door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the silence that followed. Ethan remained there for what felt like an eternity. He couldn't bring himself to move, couldn't face the world outside. The video, he knew, would spread like wildfire. He would be branded, defined by his moment of weakness. The laughter of his tormentors echoed in his ears, a cruel soundtrack to his despair. Ethan finally stumbled to his feet. He splashed water on his face, trying to wash away the shame. But the image in the mirror remained. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale and drawn. He looked defeated, broken. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Students flooded the hallways, their voices a cacophony of noise. Ethan slipped out of the bathroom, his head down, his heart heavy. He wanted to disappear, to fade into the background, but he knew he couldn't. He was a viral sensation now. The whole world knew his name, and they were all laughing. Ethan's home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a prison of his own making. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating him with their familiarity. Every corner held a memory, a whisper of the laughter that followed him everywhere. He was a prisoner of his own humiliation, his every move tracked by the digital eyes of the world. The video had spread like wildfire. It had become a cruel meme, a source of endless amusement for strangers. Comments flooded social media, each one a venomous barb aimed at his shattered self-esteem. He was called names he couldn't repeat, even in the silence of his own thoughts. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued him, filled with the distorted faces of his tormentors and the echoing sound of their laughter. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart racing, the weight of the world crushing him. His parents, well-meaning but clueless, tried to reach him. They left food outside his door, their voices hesitant as they offered words of comfort that rang hollow in the face of his despair. They didn't understand. They couldn't possibly understand the depth of his pain, the all-consuming nature of his humiliation. The doorbell cut through the silence of the house like a siren. Ethan barely registered it, lost in the fog of his despair. He heard his mother's muffled voice, followed by the sound of the front door opening. A stranger's voice, deep and authoritative, filtered up the stairs.
Ethan, there's someone here to see you.
Ethan retreated further into the shadows of his room. He didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk. The world outside had become a source of pain, a constant reminder of his humiliation. He just wanted to be left alone to wallow in his misery. He heard footsteps approaching his room. His door creaked open, and a figure emerged from the shadows. The man was tall and imposing, his face etched with lines that spoke of experience and a certain world-weariness. He wore a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light, adding to his aura of quiet power.
Ethan Harris?
Ethan shrank back, his pulse quickening. He recognized the tone, the air of authority. This was not a friend come to offer comfort. This was something different, something that sent a chill down his spine. The man introduced himself as Lucas Monroe. He didn't offer a friendly smile or try to ease the tension in the room. He sat down on the edge of Ethan's bed, his movements deliberate and measured, his gaze unwavering. Ethan remained silent, his eyes fixed on the stranger, a mixture of fear and curiosity warring within him.
I know what happened to you, Ethan. I've seen the video. I know what those boys did to you.
Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected this. No one had acknowledged the depth of his pain, the utter humiliation he felt.
It wasn't right. They hurt you, humiliated you, but you don't have to let them win, Ethan. You can fight back.
His words struck a chord deep within Ethan, a flicker of defiance igniting in the ashes of his despair. Monroe leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper.
I can give you the power to make sure no one ever hurts you again.
He placed a card on the nightstand. It was black, with a single silver emblem embossed on the front. A symbol Ethan didn't recognize, but one that filled him with a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time since the video, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The black card felt heavy in Ethan's hand. It was a key, an invitation to a world he never imagined existed, a world where he could shed the skin of weakness and become something else, something stronger, something that wouldn't break. He looked around his room. The posters on the walls, the books on his shelves, they all seemed to belong to a stranger, to the boy he used to be, the boy who cried in bathroom stalls. That boy was gone, burned away in the fire of humiliation. He packed a small bag, clothes, essentials. He didn't need much. He was leaving everything behind. His past, his pain, his identity. He was stepping into the unknown, guided by the promise of power and the seductive whisper of revenge. He didn't say goodbye to his parents. He couldn't bear to see the concern in their eyes, the pity. He left a note on his pillow, simple, to the point. No explanations, no apologies, just a promise, I'll be okay. But even as he wrote the words, he knew they were a lie. The facility was cold, sterile, impersonal. It reeked of discipline and danger. Ethan was stripped of his belongings, his clothes, his identity. He was given a number, a designation. He was no longer Ethan Harris. He was a project, a work in progress. The training was brutal, relentless. They pushed him to his limits physically and mentally. He learned to fight, to shoot, to kill. He learned to suppress his emotions, to bury his pain, to become a weapon. His instructors were shadows, men and women with hard eyes and even harder hearts. They saw the potential in him, the raw intelligence, the suppressed rage. They molded him, shaped him, honed him into a blade. He excelled in everything they threw at him: weapons handling, hand-to-hand combat, tactical strategy. He absorbed knowledge like a sponge, his mind a weapon as dangerous as any firearm. He was a natural, a prodigy, a monster in the making.
You're doing well, Harris, but remember, this is just the beginning.
The words echoed in Ethan's mind. Just the beginning. The nights were the worst. When the lights went out and the silence descended, the ghosts came calling. Brad Matthews' face twisted in a cruel smirk, the echoes of laughter, the weight of humiliation. He couldn't escape them. Not here, not in the cold, sterile confines of the facility. He trained harder, pushed himself further. He used the pain as fuel, the anger, the desire for revenge. It was a dangerous game he was playing, feeding the darkness within, but it was the only way he knew how to survive. His handlers saw the change in him, the growing darkness, the coldness in his eyes. They didn't discourage it. They encouraged it, nurtured it. They knew what they were creating, a weapon forged in the fires of trauma and fueled by vengeance, a weapon they could unleash on the world. Ethan embraced the darkness. He had to. It was the only way to silence the ghosts, the only way to become the weapon they wanted him to be, the only way to exact his revenge. Months turned into years. The boy who had once been Ethan Harris vanished completely. In his place stood a soldier, a warrior, a ghost. He was a weapon of the state, a tool of destruction, a hollow hero. He went by many names, aliases designed to protect his true identity. But his enemies knew him by another name: the Reaper. He was a whisper in the shadows, a phantom on the battlefield, death personified. He excelled in every mission: infiltration, assassination, espionage. He was a ghost in the machine, a phantom in the system. He moved with deadly grace, his every action precise, efficient, lethal. He felt nothing, no remorse, no guilt, no fear. He was a machine, programmed to kill, and kill he did, without hesitation, without mercy. He was the perfect weapon, and he was just getting started. The world knew him as a hero, a savior, a shield against the darkness. They whispered his name with reverence and fear. He was a phantom, a ghost story whispered in hushed tones. He was the embodiment of righteous fury, a force of nature unleashed upon the wicked. His image, carefully crafted by unseen hands, graced the covers of magazines and news websites. A handsome face, hardened by experience, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see into your very soul. He was a symbol of hope in a world teetering on the brink. But behind the mask of heroism, Ethan was a void, a hollow shell of a man, driven by the echoes of past trauma and the cold, calculating logic of a machine. He moved from mission to mission, a phantom in the night, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered lives in his wake. He had become the very thing he once feared, a predator, a monster lurking in the shadows. He was the weapon they had forged him to be, wielded with ruthless efficiency by the unseen hands that controlled his destiny. Sleep offered no escape from the darkness that consumed him. He dreamt of blood and fire, of the faces of those he had killed staring up at him with accusing eyes. He dreamt of Brad Matthews, his laughter echoing in the corridors of his mind, a constant reminder of the humiliation that had set him on this path. He tried to drown the memories in alcohol and fleeting encounters with women who were drawn to his aura of danger and mystery. But the emptiness remained, a gaping maw that threatened to swallow him whole. He was a ghost haunting his own life, a stranger to himself and to the world he moved through. He had become a weapon, wielded with ruthless efficiency by the very forces that had promised him salvation. But the price of his power was his soul. And as the missions piled up, one after another, Ethan began to wonder if it had all been worth it. The debriefings were always the same. A sterile room, devoid of personality, with a table and two chairs facing each other. He would sit across from his handler, a man named Agent Thompson, whose face seemed permanently fixed in a mask of professional detachment. Thompson would go over the mission details, praising Ethan's efficiency and ruthlessness. He would speak of collateral damage with the same detached tone he used to discuss the weather. Numbers on a report, lives extinguished without a second thought. Ethan would listen, his face betraying no emotion. He was a ghost, a phantom inhabiting the body of a weapon. He had learned to compartmentalize, to shut off the part of himself that still clung to some semblance of humanity. But sometimes when the nightmares became too real, when the faces of the dead haunted his waking hours, Ethan would catch a glimpse of something in Thompson's eyes, a flicker of fear, of respect, of something akin to awe. And in those fleeting moments, Ethan knew that he had become something truly monstrous. The file landed on the table with a dull thud. It was unremarkable, just another folder filled with intelligence reports and surveillance photos. But for Ethan, it was a beacon, a call to arms. It contained the name that had haunted him for years, a name etched in the deepest recesses of his memory. Brad Matthews, the architect of his suffering, the face that haunted his nightmares, the man who had set him on this path of destruction. He was no longer the cocky teenager who ruled the halls of their high school. Time and the trappings of success had molded him into something different, something more refined but no less cruel. The mission was simple: silence a loose end. Matthews had stumbled onto something he shouldn't have, something that threatened to expose a delicate operation. Ethan was the solution, the ultimate weapon deployed to tie up loose ends. He stared at the file, his face a mask of indifference. But behind the cold, calculating gaze, a storm raged. The ghosts of the past stirred, their whispers growing louder, their demands for vengeance echoing in his ears. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. The memories flooded back unbidden and unwelcome. The taunts, the shoves, the laughter that cut like a knife, the locker, the video, the utter humiliation that had shattered his world. He had tried to bury it all, to suppress the pain, to transform himself into something cold and unfeeling, but the ghosts of the past were not so easily silenced. They lingered in the shadows of his mind, their whispers growing louder with each passing year. And now, with Brad Matthews' file lying open before him, they threatened to consume him entirely. He could still feel the sting of every insult, the weight of every blow. He could still hear the echo of his own sobs in that empty bathroom stall, the sound of his own humiliation broadcast for the world to see. It was a wound that refused to heal, a scar that throbbed with a dull ache that intensified with each passing year. And now, he finally had the chance to make it right, to exact his revenge, to silence the ghosts of the past once and for all. The drive to Matthews' estate was a blur. Ethan barely registered the passing scenery, his mind consumed by the task at hand. He reviewed the mission parameters, the layout of the house, the security protocols. He was a machine, a precision instrument honed to a razor's edge. But beneath the surface, a primal instinct stirred, the hunter stalking his prey, the predator closing in on its kill. He had spent years honing his skills, transforming himself into a weapon of unparalleled lethality. And tonight, he would unleash that weapon on the man who had wronged him. He parked a safe distance away, his movements fluid and silent. He donned his tactical gear, each piece a familiar weight, a reminder of the darkness he had embraced. He checked his weapons, their cold steel a comfort in the night. He moved through the shadows, a ghost in the night. He bypassed the security systems with practiced ease, his movements a symphony of stealth and precision. He was a predator, and this was his hunting ground. He found Matthews in his study, surrounded by the trappings of success. The man looked up, his eyes widening with recognition and a flicker of fear. He had aged, but Ethan would recognize those cruel eyes anywhere. Matthews stammered, his voice a mix of disbelief and terror. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes, cold and empty, said everything. The years melted away. The boy in the bathroom stall was gone, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. The hunter had become the hunted. The monster had been unmasked. ' The silence in the aftermath was deafening. Ethan stood over Matthew's broken body, the life draining from his eyes. The deed was done, his revenge complete, yet a chilling emptiness pervaded him. There was no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, only a hollowness that seemed to consume him from the inside out. He had spent years clinging to the hope that this moment, this act of retribution, would bring him closure, that it would cauterize the wounds of the past and silence the demons that haunted him. But as he looked down at the lifeless form at his feet, he realized the terrible truth. The boy who had been so cruelly bullied, the boy who had sought solace in the pages of books and the quiet corners of his mind was gone, erased, replaced by something cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of humanity. He had become the very monster he once feared, his soul sacrificed on the altar of vengeance. He had won, but at what cost? He moved through the rest of the mission on autopilot, his movements precise, his actions efficient. He left no trace of his presence, erasing himself from the scene just as surely as he had erased Brad Matthews from existence. He was a ghost, a phantom, a whisper in the wind. He returned to the sterile confines of the facility, the place that had been his crucible, his forge, his prison. He reported the successful completion of his mission, his voice devoid of emotion, his face a mask of indifference. His superiors praised his efficiency, his ruthlessness, his unwavering commitment to the cause. They spoke of his future, of the missions that awaited him, of the enemies that needed to be silenced. They saw him as a weapon, a tool to be wielded in their endless pursuit of power and control. But as Ethan listened to their accolades, a single, terrifying thought echoed through the hollow chambers of his heart. He was no longer certain he was any different from the monsters he hunted. The price of power, he realized with a chilling certainty, was everything.